RuneScape 3, the older than old school but newer and weirder version of RuneScape, finally released its very first league, the Catalyst League. If you don't know what a league is by now, it's a temporary Iron Man only game mode with accelerated progression that usually has a funny little twist. The last OSRS league, for example, being both locked to your choice of 3 regions and including harder Echo boss versions with super powerful drops. But that begs the question, what exactly is the funny little twist for Catalyst League? Well, the twist here is that there isn't really a twist, and it's actually just a lot of copied homework from the old school RuneScape side of things. How much of the old school team's homework did they copy? Is this league even any good? Today I'll be going over my thoughts on both the Catalyst League as well as RS3 itself from the perspective of an exclusively old school RuneScape player, some of the things I liked, more of the things that I don't really like and definitely need some improvement, and how I accidentally ended up getting just a little bit addicted. On September 15th, when the league began, I set out with a very casual mindset. So casual, in fact, that I actually started 6 hours late. But the plan I had was simple. I wanted to experience some of the new content that is unique to this game. I'm talking new skills, rework skills, expansions past level 99, new bosses, new regions. Apparently there's alternate dimensions now, or maybe they're planets, something like that. Honestly, I'm still not quite sure how these work. I didn't really care about going for the Dragon Trophy or any of those cosmetic league rewards if I'm being honest, but I'll talk about those in detail later. My journey began with surprisingly a feature that's actually unique to the RS3 League, account nomination. Essentially, this is a way of playing leagues on one account while sending all of your earned points at the end to a different one. Can I just say that I've played multiple different leagues on multiple different accounts, mainly just because I'm not trying to keep up with several active subscriptions, but this feature is out of everything in the Catalyst League, something that I would really like to see in OSRS. And if anyone's curious, I'm playing this league on my One Chunk account, and I'm actually using this feature to nominate my main account on the off chance I ever actually play RS3 on it again. Finally making it into the game for real though, I need to talk about what is one of the biggest pain points I had for RS3. Not just the league, but the game itself. And of course, I'm talking about the UI. Or more specifically, I guess you could say the customization and settings in general. Is the customization bad? For the most part, no. It's actually very powerful and there's a lot that you can do with it, and that's where the problem lies. There are just too many damn options. Take a look at Old School Runescape. The obvious limiting factor we have here is that you can only open a single interface at a time, but the upside is that if I click over here on this tab, I know where my spells are, and if I click over here, I know how to find my achievement diaries. Easy peasy. Now here's my RS3 interface. As you can see, I have most of the typical interfaces scattered around, inventory, skills, equipment, etc. One thing that doesn't actually have its own interface in this game are the achievement diaries, but that's okay, I can press escape and go here just like an OSRS, right? Wrong. It's actually under the Hero tab, under Achievements, Area Task Sets on the sidebar, and then a drop down to select which area, and after all of that, a redirect to the actual list of tasks. The point I'm trying to make here is that once you get used to it, get your settings and all that configured properly, make a layout, steal one from someone else, which is a nice feature by the way, all of this kind of becomes a non-issue. But the onboarding as a new player is like sliding me a rocket schematic and saying, figure this out, good luck. Okay, so the interface, bit of a turn off, but who cares? I'm here for the league content anyway, so let's talk about those relics. Oh boy, how do I put this? The relics are not terrible for the very first league, but you can definitely see the inspiration from Old School. There are some tier choices that will basically ruin your league experience if you choose the wrong one, and overall, they're not really selling that power fantasy you would expect to see in a limited time game mode like this. But I'll go through them and explain. Tier 1 is a choice between Animal Wrangler, which is a buff for fishing, cooking, and hunter, Divine Woodcutter, which is a buff for woodcutting, firemaking, and divination, and then Excavator, which is a buff for mining, smithing, archaeology, and to a lesser extent, crafting. You might think that all these relics sound pretty equal, especially if you aren't familiar with archaeology, but simply put, if you don't take Excavator, you're throwing. Not only is this relic just flat out stronger than the other two, but take Divine Woodcutter for example. Divination is a skill that you should literally never train, because it is completely solved by an activity that you can complete twice per day. This is a separate issue with a lot of the skills, which I'll talk about later on in this video, but for now, just know that Excavator is much, much stronger than the other two. Moving on to the tier 2 relics, we have another very unbalanced decision. Golden Footed, which lets you effectively AFK 99 agility, which you can actually already do in the league in multiple different ways. 5 Finger Discount, which sounds like a pretty decent buff to thieving until you realize that thieving in RS3 is just doing 3 quests and then AFKing saves. And of course, Farming Frenzy, which is such a massive buff to farming, it's not even fair that the other 2 relics have to compete against it. All patches are treated as being ultra composted for the extra yield. You have a 20% chance to save seeds when planting. Seeds grow instantly. An additional 15% chance of increased crop yield. Patches are harvested instantly and automatically noted. And on top of all of that, when you plant herbs, you plant 10 seeds for the price of 1, which also can still get reduced to 0. If all this wasn't enough to sell the Strengthless Relic, there's also tricks that make 200 mil farming and herb lore viable. Farming can even give you millions of XP per hour to your lowest skill with Butterflies in Pref Dennis. This relic clears the other two. Alright, surely the third tier of relics won't follow this trend of unbalanced lack of actual meaningful choices, right? Actually, yeah, to be completely honest, tier 3 is one of the 2 relic tiers I think are actually fair and balanced. That's not to say they don't have their own problems. Namely, a ton of these teleports are going to be locked behind quests, but the choice between Fairy's Flight, Assassin's Insight, and Voidwalker basically comes down to which teleports do you think would be the most useful. I personally went with Assassin's Insight because I figured it would be helpful for Slayer since it's one of the skills that go past level 99, but I don't think you can actually make a wrong choice for tier 3. And while I'm not really going to cover the passives you unlock for each tier, tier 3 gives you reduced cooldown of movement abilities and unlocks dive automatically, which means from tier 3 onwards, I'm freaking zooming around the map, which I just wanted to say really quick is so fun. Unfortunately though, we are returning to the same unbalanced issue with the tier 4 relics. Production Master is just okay. Rejuvenated lets you pick a previous relic from the first 3 tiers, but honestly none of them are even really worth going back for. And the real problem child of this tier, Clue Connoisseur. Unlimited amount of clue scrolls, which by default they do stack in RS3. Double chance of getting clues in general. Clues have the minimum number of steps, double caskets per clue along with the maximum number of rewards, and you get the Globetrotter outfit with infinite charges, which, to just explain what the hell even is that, the outfit will let you teleport to clue locations, act as outfit for emote clues if you have them stored in hidey holes, automatically perform those emotes, reroll clues if you can do a clue, and honestly, getting a lot of clues you can't do in leagues is still annoying, but the option to just reroll the ones you can't complete is very, very strong. The real issue here though is that, just like in old school leagues, there are a bajillion points locked behind clues. I mean, sure, if you don't mind having a harder time getting through your tiers and just want to skip doing clues entirely, then by all means, pick another relic. But the clue one is just way better for a general league experience. It's not even fair. Finally, you've made it to tier 5, the tier in which we get the combat relic and finally get to feel overpowered. Yeah, not quite. So I'm by no means an expert on RS3 combat or anything, but from what I've seen, read, and experienced myself, these relics go something like this. The melee relic is insanely strong due to the plus 500 base damage bonus and the inherent healing. Necromancy relic is decent since it gets a flat 25% damage buff. Magic relic is pretty bad because it only gives you crit strike damage without any increase to crit strike chance. And then the range relic is apparently garbage because getting to hit in an AoE is actually pointless for most bossing content. I never would have seen that being the case. I personally went with the melee relic because of the healing. That's what seemed the most appealing to me, but the biggest issue with all these combat relics is that regardless of what you choose and what you do, by the end of the league, it feels like you're only marginally stronger than you would be from having best in slot in the main game. In an OSRS league, for example, you're doing content far above your pay grade with whatever gear you have at the time. But in this game, I feel like I still need to have good gear, decent supplies, etc. Another thing I would have liked to see is a lot of these shared bonuses like 100% hit chance to be for all styles just to make off-styling viable. In my case, melee was great because that's the relic I went with, but other styles were just annoying, and in all honesty, I completely avoided them when possible. It's important to also note that tier 5 was originally at a whopping 10,000 points before it got lowered down to 6, which is such a great change because genuinely I would have probably quit early on without this. Going through 5 tiers before reaching your I'm stronger tier relic is already pushing it, but 10,000 points? Nah. Now we get to talk about the tier 6 relics, by far the worst design tier of the entire league. There are 2 options, Banker's Note and Perfection. Banker's Note, my beloved, one of the greatest relics of all time. I absolutely love this thing in OSRS. See, there are 2 huge problems with this relic being copy-pasted directly into RS3. First off, there's simply no real need for this relic to exist. There are banks on top of banks, beside banks, next to banks, within banks in this game. Oh, but I want more boss supplies, so I reduce trips? Nope, instant teleports to all the bosses in the game for free. And the second major flaw is that it's apparently complete jank to use and barely functions like you would expect, which is made worse because unlike OSRS, there's no plugins or menu entry swapping here to make it easy. So much this game be an easy scape, huh? What happened to that? But if all that wasn't bad enough, Perfection is literally super duper overpowered. Infinite invention materials and no charges required saves so much time and hassle as an Iron Man especially, but more important than anything else, you get the built-in effects of the Golden God Relic from OSRS, which means that when you alch something, there's a 66% chance to save the item, which simply put means infinite GP for free. Honestly, what a blunder of a tier. At least I can speak positively about the tier 7 relics though, because like I was saying earlier, this is the only other tier that I find to be well designed and balanced. This tier contains Ascension, Specialist, and Everlasting Faith. You know how I can tell this is actually a well designed tier? Because this is the only tier that I felt like there was a ton of discourse around which relic people think is the best, which relic is kind of bait, and the uncertainty of which relic they actually wanted to take. But the real giveaway, well, let me just retell my own personal experience. Originally, I was torn between which of the 3 relics I wanted to take. Initially, I wanted Everlasting Faith because infinite prayer and extra healing seems nice, and you also get that cheat death. But the Specialist relic also seems very strong, and I don't actually have to grind out a spec weapon, which is apparently really good for melee. Yeah, I don't actually want to spam click specs on repeat since they don't actually work with evolution. But also, there's this weird Elder God book that spams out sick looking abilities. I just could not decide. The one thing that every other tier was missing for me, that feeling of indecisiveness, because all of the relics are honestly good in their own way. I didn't feel like I had to pick a certain relic or I was throwing my league. So for tier 7, very good job. I hope that in future leagues, all the tiers feel just like this one, have meaningful choices and options that feel like they actually belong in this game, instead of being copy-pasted from Old School. Wow, it's almost like you could have designed something made for this game exclusively that could have been dope. So now that you have a general idea about the relics, let's talk about those tasks that you're going to have to complete to unlock them. There's a ton of tasks in this league, but don't worry because I'll be very brief. The problem I have with the tasks is that they fall into a couple of categories. Tasks that are literally copy-pasted from Old School Runescape, like this task to use the special attack of a dragon axe. You know how I know this was just straight up copied over? RuneScape 3 renamed axes to hatchets back in 2009. You're not getting that one past me, buddy. We also have filler padding tasks like chop 1,000 logs, burn 1,000 logs, catch 1,000 fish, cook 1,000 fish. You get the idea. There's also just a lack of polish when it comes to task difficulties and points rewarded. Smithing tasks are a great example of this issue. Smith a mithril plate body in the drain ore sewers is an 80 points task requiring 30 smithing. However, making a batch of cannonballs for this task not only requires 5 more smithing levels, but also 2 different quests. And it's 30 points. Huh? Like what? What is that? How does that work? You know what I actually really loved about completing tasks in this league though? The sick guitar riff. Okay, admittedly, it did get old fast when I was completing tasks left and right in the beginning, but later on when completing tasks were very few and far between, that little music hit felt so good. In general, I have to say that throughout my entire experience, I was a huge fan of the RS3 music. I think trying to directly compare tracks is not a good way to do it. Take the Old School Runescape Sea Shanty 2. versus the RS3 version. Do I think the RS3 version is better? Hell no. But this harmonica section in particular, you can't tell me that doesn't hit different. While we're on the topic of music and I'm already being subjective as hell, I might as well talk about some of the art and graphic design. I am pretty torn here. There are so many incredible looking areas in this game. You even have the ability to customize the skybox to mix and match your look. I really like the Eclipse skybox, for example. Just wow, honestly. But the more you explore, the more inconsistencies you start to notice. After all, this game is built on years upon years of content, from horribly outdated models to dinosaurs and whatever the heck these guys even are. I actually kind of like them because they remind me of my No Man's Sky character, but after a point I just started to think, is half of this even RuneScape? I don't know, art is extremely subjective, so who am I to say that this weird looking thing is any less RuneScape-y than this weird looking thing? And speaking on that RuneScape feeling, of course I want to address the big bad evolution of combat, the great cataclysmic event that killed RuneScape and spawned the old school version to begin with. Honestly, I think anyone that says RS3 is bad just because of EOC hasn't actually played the game since it launched back in 2012. At that time, yeah, sure it was buggy, and it felt horribly unbalanced, but now, 13 years later, it's not an issue. If you use Revolution or Revolution++, which automatically just uses abilities and then thresholds and ultimates, which are your adrenaline spenders, if you use either of those, the game plays almost identical to old school RuneScape. I mean, sure, if you want to deal the most damage, you should probably do everything manually with some thought put into it, but I don't think this is what actually makes RS3 so off-putting. The actual bad part about RS3 is just how little it respects your time. And before you get it twisted, no, I'm not implying that osrs respects your time either. At the end of the day, both these games are designed to keep you playing and paying, but RS3 takes this a little too far. First up are the hourlies, dailies, weeklies, and even monthlies, and what makes these so annoying is that RuneScape 3 players will defend content like this by saying, if you don't like it, don't do it. Yeah, that's great advice in general, except for the fact that most of these are so overpowered that it's a massive waste of your time to skip them. The worst offender are these hourly wilderness flash events. I scammed myself early on by not going out my way to do them, but wow, that was a huge mistake. By skipping these events, not only are you missing out on free loot, but depending on your League XP multiplier, you miss out on millions of XP for what is essentially just a 5-minute chore every hour. For example, the Evil Bloodwood Tree event was giving me nearly 1 million farming XP, 1 million woodcutting XP, and 1 million firemaking XP at the same time. 3 million XP basically completely free. All I have to do is stop what I'm doing every hour, or in the case of this event, every 12 or something like that. Also, I'm not going to be going into much detail about MTX because except for the occasional ad I would see logging into the game, they were disabled in leagues. But one thing you do get for free in leagues that you would normally pay for are the metrics. Stuff like seeing your XP per hour, estimated time to level, damage dealt, wealth changes, etc. This is normally an $8 a month subscription in the normal game, which is kind of gross. I mean, it's kind of hard for me to say because this is all stuff you'd get for free with the RuneLite plugins, but yeah, not a fan of that, but didn't really have to experience that. But you do know what league-specific thing that made me feel like my time wasn't respected at all. Quests. Why do I have to do so many quests? A major issue is that RS3 doesn't have any form of quest helper, so I'm reading wiki guides left and right, which, by the way, sometimes have major mistakes in them because it's from a quest and no one has actually completed in the last 15 years. There are 269 quests in RS3 and 56 mini-quests, a grand total of 325. And you know how many of those were generously auto-completed for leagues? 18, the majority of which were to unlock Prif Dennis. Don't get me wrong, lore is cool, I like lore. XP rewards, which by the end multiplier totaling millions of XP for the quest, that's also pretty cool. But it's leagues. There's just too much content to be doing in a 60-day period with the game itself, much less adding on hundreds of quests, content locked behind quests. I mean, I did what I felt like was the bare minimum amount of questing to accomplish my goals, and I'm still missing several boss encounters. I think I'm missing the ogre area, I don't even know, and I still feel like I did more questing than I should have had to do. Alright, now that I've covered and complained about some of the ups and downs of my League experience, here's a rapid fire section of stuff that I want to talk about in no particular order. First up are the new skills, and while some of these are old enough that I have experienced them in the past, I just want to give a quick rundown on how I feel about them. Summoning, actually a very appropriate skill. Aside from a few outliers such as the Pack Mammoth, which to me feels a little less RuneScapey than, say, a Pack Yak, but out of all the skills unique to this game, I think summoning actually fits the bill. I think it makes the most sense. Dungeoneering, I hate this skill. Simple as that. I never understood why this is even a skill in the first place, when it really is just a minigame pretending to be a skill at best. I do like the idea of the resource dungeons that you can unlock around the world depending on your level, and some of the rewards you can buy, which thankfully most of the good ones are part of a League passive, but aside from that, glorified minigame, not a fun skill, don't like it, whatever, moving on. Divination, good idea in theory, but really just kind of lame in practice. I love the idea of being able to transmute, say, 3 Adior into 1 Rune Idol, but it's pretty much actually useless in 99% of situations, even as an Iron Man. Being able to make Sign of Porters to automatically transport materials to your bank is a cool idea, but really just whatever, especially since there's so many banks in this game. Above all though, trading it is just super duper slow and boring, and you're better off just doing the cash twice per day, so not great. Invention, I think if I was using the Grand Exchange, or if I always had infinite materials like I do in the League, then I would say I actually like the idea of the skill, kind of. Being able to augment your weapons, tools, and armor with perks that provide either nice quality of life, more experience gained, or more damage dealing, all pretty sweet. But unfortunately, it's basically just glorified gambling to get optimal perks. I mean, you can get some okay perks pretty reliably, but Bis or Perfect can be quite rare. So I guess the way I would describe the skill is that I kind of like it, but it's also kind of a big middle finger to my time and effort. As for archaeology, doing this skill in Leagues pointed out its biggest flaw to me immediately. It's just far too slow and tedious. Click the dig spot, wait, and wait, and wait, and keep waiting, get an item, nice, now do it again. Obviously, there's some more depth to this skill, like repairing these finds in order to complete collections, doing mysteries at each dig site, which usually kind of involve just digging up a lot of more stuff. You also have this monolith that can give you some pretty powerful buffs. There's even some sick lore. I think everybody likes lore to an extent. I mean, it's pretty cool stuff, but just takes way too long. Too long. Too slow. Don't like it. Finally, we have necromancy. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it since I mainly use melee throughout the League, but what I will say is that having to do ritual after ritual after ritual to get components to do more rituals, so I could do rituals for souls to unlock talents, to unlock abilities, to use the combat style and not be complete garbage, and then I'd have to like upgrade my gear and then do more rituals to get components to upgrade my gear again. Honestly, it just felt really bad, especially in a League environment. I was gaining more than enough XP by just not doing the skill and instead doing my wilderness events for combat experience that I would just put into necromancy. So yeah, didn't really care for it in a situation as an off style, but maybe had I picked the necromancy relic, I would have changed my mind. Maybe if I experienced the real game, I'd like it, but yeah. So that's all the new skills, but I also have thoughts about the skills that got expansions beyond level 99. Thankfully, I can tell you my simplified opinion for all of these. Content past level 99 is pretty interesting to be fair, but there's a major downside to that, and that is compared to level 99 at 13 million XP, you have to get basically 10 times that amount. If that's in a skill that you don't really like, well, get stuffed, I guess. We're nearing the end now. Stay with me here. Let me quickly talk about the combat. Let me just get it out of the way. I played the entire League in one of two modes, either on Revolution or Revolution++, which means for the most part, it was just like I was playing Old School Runescape, but sometimes I'd watch my character leap into the air and hit a massive crit. Of course, I know that manually using your abilities is way better, but let me tell you a little secret that maybe like 2 of my viewers actually know. I've played a lot of MMOs over the years, and you know what I don't really like about most of them that they all have in common? Abilities, or more specifically, I guess you could say ability rotations. Memorizing a 13 button rotation fine, that's fair enough, whatever. But doing that over and over and over throughout your play sessions with every piece of content being that gameplay, yeah, I'm not a fan of that. Tangent aside though, I think Revolution is a great solution to bridge the gap from old school RuneScape's click mob combat and the typical MMO ability gameplay. So I think that's all the main talking points I wanted to go over, but there's still the topic of what I did all this for. Of course, during the league for the max cape, and after the league ends on my main account that I probably won't even log on to purchase, the Catalyst League rewards. First off, the max cape is so much cooler visually compared to the osrs version, since you have the ability to completely customize the colors. I also really like how there's a ton of presets for different bosses, and honestly, just give me this in old school stats, even though I don't even have a max cape. It is a bit of a letdown that I don't get to have any cool particles like the 120 capes, but technically speaking, there is a master max cape for reaching 120 in every skill, but I'm just not that committed. As for the league rewards themselves, honestly, I'm not a fan of any of these. The trophies are very, very sad in comparison to osrs, and also I'm 90% sure they're a melee weapon slot cosmetic anyways, which is a real shame. And I just need to say that in a game where you can buy a million different pieces of MTX that are just probably better than any of these free cosmetics, what's the point? The most expensive thing in the shop, for example, is the Aura Override, which is a handful of particles that I'm pretty sure if you're next to more than a single other person with particles, you wouldn't even be able to notice them. In conclusion, I had a ton of fun, and despite getting a little bit addicted and somewhat baited into wanting to play the main game, I know deep down it's just not really worth it. The game just doesn't feel as though it respects my time. Is that to say old school RuneScape respects my time? No, not really. But RS3 has been built with so many features over the years that are almost mobile game in nature, designed to keep you playing, spending, grinding. Playing an iron maybe alleviates a lot of the pressure caused by certain aspects like the monetization, but just as many problems still remain. I think there's plenty of parts to love about RS3, the art, the music, rolling around, but at the end of the day, I think Old School RuneScape just fits me better. Hey, thanks for watching this video. I had 585 gigs of League footage on my hard drive that I had no clue how to edit into an interesting video, so I made this instead. It might come across as a bit too negative, or even a bit rushed, but that's mainly because Old School RuneScape's bingo league that's not actually a league comes out in less than 4 days. So if I ever want my RS3 league experience to see the light of day, it's now or never. Also, a huge thank you to the channel members for your continued support. I'm sure most of you probably don't actually care about me playing RS3 League instead of putting out more chunk content, but I promise you that there's some good content in the works. Okay, now I have to actually go edit this all together and make the thumbnails, so